the season's officially here. Before we even get into our rundown here that I've got in front of me, season officially here. It feels pretty good, huh?
There's the whole, college football is ruined. It'll never be the same. I hate it. And then August hits and you love college football all over again. And you start talking about the matchups. And yeah, college football is different, but it's still what we love. And the nucleus is right there. So the fact that we are just a couple of days away from Kansas State and Iowa State and a myriad of other games in this sport is awesome. I've got chills this week, man. College football has returned.
Dude, so last year, I've said this a million times. People are probably tired of hearing it. I was in Dublin for this opening game. The game was the day before my daughter's birthday. This year, it's 2 days before her birthday. Next year, UNC-TCU, it's actually the way it falls. It's like 5 days before. So I'm going to try and go. But all that said, we're taking my daughter to a water resort in Orlando, like a park and all this stuff on Saturday and Sunday for her birthday this weekend. And I told him I've very delicately approached the subject of babe, at 11 a.m. on Saturday. I know you want to go do the water slides but it's for work, I've got to see what's going on between Farmageddon. And she was like, well, what can you watch it on your phone for the first hour and then we'll go have them take a nap at noon and then you can watch the end. We'll have them eat lunch at 1 and you can watch it. And I was like, that works. Equal fair trade. We'll do it. So that's where we'll start. Farmageddon in Dublin. Obviously, if people aren't, I try to implore people for months and months and months to go do this. If, we're 4 days away from the game, you're probably not going now by my convincing here on College Football Addiction. But an incredible, incredible rivalry happening in one of the most special ways possible to literally kick off the college football season. Kansas State, an early favorite in this and has been a favorite the whole time, 3 points. But you're talking a coin flip type of game. Avery Johnson, Rocco, this is fun. This is exactly what you want, a Big 12 premiere. Before we even maybe dive into the matchup itself, thoughts on just the Big 12 is center stage on Saturday.
Yeah, the Big 12 being at center stage is awesome for the Big 12. It really does stink for Kansas State and Iowa State in a lot of ways, though. And that's kind of how I've ebbed and flowed on my thoughts of this entire matchup is if you lose, and Florida State kind of saw this last season, if you lose in Dublin, Ireland, you now have, and you've spent this week and a half, 2 weeks, now year and a half of planning that you've all put into this matchup. You just lost. You gave up a ton of practice time and a home game and a conference game that was close for your school to drive there, fan base to drive there. And now that you've given that up, you've lost. You got to go back to the States, play a fairly tough non-conference slate, get into Big 12 play. It's hard to reset. It's hard to get back into business. That's going to be the reality for one of either Iowa State or Kansas State. In my opinion, it is Iowa State, who still has Iowa on the docket. South Dakota is a top five FCS school. They'll beat them. They'll be pushed. Arkansas State is a game in Jonesboro. Arkansas State's not going to beat Iowa State, but it's going to suck to have to go to Jonesboro and make a trip to a Sun Belt opponent this year for the Cyclones. That is the negative of being in Ireland for these two teams. However, the positive, the entire world gets to watch Kansas State. They get to watch Avery Johnson and Rocco Becht, one of the most underrated quarterback matchups in the country. A lot of people are still not buying the hype on Becht, who was a 3,500-yard passer last season. And yeah, he had 2 NFL-caliber wide receivers, 2 of the better receivers in this draft. But still, Xavier Townsend, they picked him up in the portal out of UCF. They're going to be just fine in that category. And they're going to be a team that still relies on letting him throw the football. If you look at Pick 6 previews, they tell you that Kansas State is tied for 5th in the Big 12, and Iowa State is 7th in the conference going into this season. This is an Iowa State school that won 10-plus games for the first time ever last year. They ended up going 11-3 on their slate, and a Kansas State team that felt like it kind of underachieved. And Chris Kleiman's been asked about, do you feel like you've underachieved these last couple of seasons? He said, look, we won 9 games last year. We've won 8 games every year since 2021. Most schools, even in the SEC, would kill for that. Arkansas, with their budget, A&M, they would kill for that. Kansas State did that. We're walking into a game that's going to display 2 of the Big 12's best. And on top of that, TJ, this is a rivalry matchup. These 2 schools hate each other in the coolest way ever. Why do they hate each other? We don't really know. It's just they both do the corn and the grain and the farm. And I keep asking people, why is there this seething thought about the other? What is it that really makes you not like the other? And people are like, I don't know. We just played them so many times for so long, and they all have this one memory of when so-and-so beat so-and-so. And now, especially under Matt Campbell and the success that they've had, Iowa State is really really in a good spot to be solid this year if they're escaping Ireland with a win against Kansas State. It could be another 10-win season. It's just that's a big if for me in a game that means so much to both these schools, not just as a standalone, but also as a rivalry.
Yeah, and you mentioned that. The biggest thing I thought was the exact opposite. When Florida State lost to Georgia Tech, I was able to, in my mind, now it quickly got disproven on Labor Day and then through the rest of the year, but in my mind, I was able to say, listen, maybe it was just the pomp and circumstance of the game. Maybe it was just all the hype from last year. You had the playoff snub, you had everything else, you had fallen short of expectation, whatever. We'll be able to flush that. So I'm going, you went kind of negative. I'll go ultra positive for the loser of this game. You do have the opportunity, and both these guys are coached by super solid leaders and super solid men that I have a lot of confidence in. And I know how they're going to spin it. I already know what listen, we're leaving this loss in Dublin. Like I can already hear that in whoever the post-game video comes out of the losing coach in the locker room. And that's easier said than done for sure. I do think being able to reset and say, hey, we are leaving this here and we're going to go back, play the rest of our non-con, get into Big 12 play, which is what's most important, clearly. Obviously, this is being a Big 12 game, but let's get through our non-con, let's get through Big 12 play and really make our mark in the States. Much easier said than done, but that's the talking point coming out of the game for one of these two teams. It would be very easy to say that whichever quarterback plays better on Saturday is going to win this game. You've got a big time, like you just mentioned, one of the best quarterback matchups in the country any week when you look at this game. So I don't know that we need to spend a ton of time on, well, yeah, if Avery plays better, if Rocco plays better, their team's likely going to win. Where's the matchup in the trenches here, right? Where games are won and lost, and I don't want to be so cliche with that, but where's the advantage on both sides of the line of scrimmage in this?
Yeah, let's take a look first at the defense. This is how it's going to be played by Iowa State. They want to stop the rush. They want to stop Dylan Edwards. They want to make sure that Kansas State cannot establish that ground and pound, and it makes a lot of sense. Why? Last year, the Cyclones, number one in the country in rushing defense. They were a stalwart on that side of the ball, and if they want to win this game, it's going to have to come from that once again. They're going to have to stop the rush once again. Their defensive line was elite last season. They needed to build up their offensive line. Talking to Nick Maravets about the way that they're going to look this season is one thing that has been a staple of my offseason, trying to get more information on how Iowa State has bolstered that offensive line. But the D-line, the defense in that category is not where I'm worried. They were this is an Iowa State defense that has to focus on that. And this is a Kansas State offense that has to focus on that, rushing the football. And then Kansas State's defense was 28th in the nation, 119 yards per game against that rush. So it's like immovable object, unstoppable force, whatever that saying is, that's where it's going to be tough this year. Can Iowa State actually stop the run against Kansas State with what they've got coming back? And can Kansas State establish the run with one of the best rushing offense in the country last season, 11th in the nation running the football? And can Iowa State establish the run with Abu Sama? We talked a lot last year about Carson Hansen as well. Can they be the best rushing attack in the Big 12? I mean, as much as you're like, hey, trenches, we got two good quarterbacks, two good running back rooms, and I don't know where to go from there. That's the difference. Might just be the fact that Kansas State has a slightly better, in my opinion, offensive line, and that Iowa State is not as elite in the quarterback category, despite having a very good quarterback. And again, Pick Six Previews has this game separated by about a field goal in favor of Kansas State. And they say that Kansas State has the fourth best offensive line in the Big 12. Iowa State has the sixth best offensive line. And this year, due to a couple guys moving around, they have Iowa State as the 10th best defensive line, Kansas State as the second best defensive line. When you hodgepodge those together, it feels like Kansas State has the advantage in the trenches. In my opinion, not by a ton, but still by enough to win.
What about X factors or weapons? Any portal additions that you think could maybe make a big impact here? We'll talk skill positions for both teams for a moment.
Yeah, if it's going to be via the portal, it's going to be how Iowa State utilizes not just its offensive line, as I mentioned, but also the transfer portal duo of Chase Sowell coming over from East Carolina, 4-star transfer, number 7 overall wide receiver, and then Xavier Townsend at UCF. The Xavier Townsend that I know is very good at football. Most of the country would see that name and think, oh, wasn't he good a couple of years ago and maybe he's washed? I don't think that is the case. I believe that he's going to come in and be a stalwart for Iowa State this season. I'm going to spend a lot of time on the Cyclones because I just gave you a lot about the Wildcats. That's who I'm looking at for Iowa State. Jared Hufford, their starting center last year, Jalen Travis, their left tackle, both left early for the NFL draft as well. So other three starters are back, but you're still replacing two of your best guys to the offensive line. You now have to lean a little bit more on your skill positions. Townsend is going to be one of the guys that I expect to be an X factor for Iowa State if they actually do come out and win the game in Dublin. Now, it's weird to say on Saturday, but this Saturday, if they win the game, because that's how close we are to college football.
Is there a coaching advantage in this game? Both two very well-respected coaches in the Big 12. It feels like you're slighting one if you pick the other, but thoughts around that?
You got a coach who's been to two Big 12 championships in his 10-year stretch, which honestly is pretty good in a conference that was dominated by Oklahoma for so long. And then a coach in Chris Kleiman that has revived Kansas State. You know, when Bill Snyder left, it was, wow, can anybody not name Bill Snyder coach at this school ever in general? And Chris Kleiman has been that guy. I remember in 2021, that weird COVID season, 2020, that the fall of 2020 is what it was, is Chris Kleiman comes into Waco. The 7-2 Baylor Bears upset Kansas State, and they're calling for his head. They wanted him fired. Now he's won a Big 12 championship against TCU, one of the most elite teams the Big 12 has ever seen. And so you're like, wow, well, shoot, that's kind of a wash. They're both the same guy. They're both the old school football coach at the team in the Midwest that really wants to ground and pound and hit you in the mouth and do things the right way. I'm going to go with a 1-to-1. They both went into schools that are very hard to win at, schools that are very hard to coach at, and have put their teams in a position to be at the top of the Big 12. I'm saying no coaching advantage. I respect them equally.
Let's make a prediction on this one. What you got? I won't even draw this question out.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Kansas State in this game. Again, the trenches are a little bit different. What Iowa State has to replace defensively, namely in their defensive trenches, give Kansas State and their elite rushing attack an advantage. Kansas State's going to win by a final of, I think we'll see this one get up into the 20s, 28-24 feels right to me. That's a very clean score, but it feels right to me. Kansas State finishes off Iowa State with a win.
Yeah, I'm going to go 30-27. Same thing. Kansas State just, I guess, is that a push? Maybe by the half a point. But yeah, so I'll go Kansas State as well in this one. All right, one question, and then we'll transition to something. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this because it would be detrimental if this didn't go the Big 12's way. But also playing is Kansas State's rival, Kansas, against Fresno State. I think that game happens. Is that a night game? Yeah, 6:30. So is there anything you like? I mean, other than just like you need to win the game, you need to win going away. Is there anything specific you want to see? Maybe how fluid Jalen Daniels is. Like, is there any, like, if you had to peg one thing for like what you want to see out of this Kansas team against an opponent that they absolutely should win 10 times out of 10 against, what would it be?
Yeah, the first thing I would emphasize to anybody here is this is not the Fresno State of old. This is not the Fresno State that you go like, oh no, Fresno State. They lost to Hawaii last year. They lost to Air Force. Air Force kind of had an ebb and flow season. Lost to UCLA. They lost to NIU. That was just in their four of their last 5 games. They went 1-4. For Kansas last season, they ended the year fairly hot. They went 3-1. Their loss to Baylor kept them out of a bowl game, but they beat Colorado by 16. They beat BYU on the road. They beat Iowa State by 9. Those are 3 of the best schools in the Big 12, and Kansas went out and waxed a couple of them. That's really impressive. That is the kind of momentum the Jayhawks do carry into this season. I think they should blow out Fresno State. And if they don't blow out Fresno State, that's where I get a little concerned. They're a 13-point favorite, and I would go to say in game 1 against an opponent who's had a decent history like Fresno State in college football the last few years, winning by 13, 14 points. It's a pretty solid blowout. If Kansas wins 38-24, I'd consider that a blowout in favor of the Jayhawks. And that's what I'm going to need to see from this roster. The return of Jalen Daniels is huge, but it's what version is he going to be? In 2024, 14 passing touchdowns, 12 interceptions, failed to hit 2,500 yards. That is bad. That is bad. He's going to have to be different, very different, and his 2023 self, not 2024 self, for Kansas to be great this season. But he could be any kind of himself, and they shouldn't lose to Fresno the same way they lost to UNLV last season.